the NCAA Division I College Cup. It's here. It's official. Final four teams who are going to go head to head. It's an exciting time. Get a look at some of these players out there who may make the choice to go pro, and for a lot of people maybe they might get a glimpse right for the first time at some of these players who, if they aren't typically in tune to the college game, these happen to be perhaps some of the more prolific games that folks can have access to or try to watch and check out these type of performances. So it's down to the Final Four. Florida State University, University of North Carolina, Alabama, and UCLA. Matches will take place Friday, December 2nd. God, I can't believe it's December already. We need to talk about that in our icebreaker. Jeez. Number 1, Florida State University versus number 2 ranked North Carolina. And then that's going to be kicking off at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then we've got number 1 Alabama versus number 1 UCLA. That's kicking off at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Shout out to Wake Med Soccer Park in Cary, North Carolina, also the home of the North Carolina Courage. They will be hosts to this fantastic event. Let's chat a little bit about it because there's a lot at stake in these final 2 matches. The winners will advance to the NCAA championship that will take place on Monday, December the 5th at 6 p.m. Eastern. Reigning champions, Florida State. Maybe let's start with this game here, FSU versus UNC. Jill, I've got to go to you first on this. You have been keeping a close eye on some of these teams and their colleges just because you've been on the call. Tell me what you're looking for out of this particular matchup.
I mean, I think that this is a familiar matchup that a lot of people in the ACC are used to seeing. I think it's 2 teams that have a little bit of a different style, especially with new leadership under Brian Penske, a bit more athleticism up top for Florida State. But UNC is just a beast in terms of how hard they press for 90 plus minutes. They make those line changes with lots of substitutions. They use a lot of players over the course of the 90 minutes, and they continue to press and press and press and press. And defensively, they've caused turnovers. They make teams make mistakes. They pick off and they profit from those turnovers, look to go to goal. And then they are an attacking side as well. Really, really special players on the ball, can beat you off of the dribble, can play around, really look to be patient, to commit end line, pull the ball back to runners through the midfield. And we've seen players like Sam Meza be able to navigate that traffic so well in those tight, congested areas and play those little slippery passes. And then they've got Ali Sentnor in the wide area. She can drift centrally. Sentnor can come in from the wide area and look to shoot herself, look slip passes. She can expose the space in behind the back line. So Florida State has a tall task ahead of them in this matchup, because UNC can beat you in a multitude of different ways, and they just continually fatigue you decision-wise, but also physically for 90 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's important to touch on that UNC is like mentally exhausting to defend because of like their off-ball movement and I mean everything that you just touched on. But these 2 programs, North Carolina and Florida State, they're prolific, right? Florida State is the reigning champions of the NCAA tournament. UNC didn't have the best time last year in 2021 in the NCAA tournament. They went out in the first round against South Carolina. So it's a little bit different this year. But Jill, as you talked about, these 2 teams know each other really well, and fans of the ACC know them really well because they played together. They played against each other all season, most recently in the tournament final, ACC tournament final, in which Florida State won 2-1. That was their 3rd straight ACC tournament, their 9th tournament championship in 12 years. So powerhouse at Florida State. Like for those that haven't been aware or been watching college soccer, Florida State has been a powerhouse, as has UNC, but Florida State saw Jalen Howell, who plays in the NWSL now, on that winning team last year in 2021. And they have some really top-notch players that they have going for them. Defensively, FSU has only conceded 1 goal in the tournament so far. So that's pretty impressive to see against this team. Now, you look at UNC, and coming off of their last match, they just beat Notre Dame 2-0. they were quick early goals from this team. Like they got on the board first, they got on the board early, and then they locked it down. So game management, I think, is going to be a really big thing in this match between UNC and Florida State for sure.
Game management. Love to hear it.
I think it'll be important, and to your point, if how much both teams decide to take risks, especially in the opening minutes of the match. And if they're pressing, high pressing, how do they beat that press, and how many numbers are they sending forward? I think Florida State do a great job of keeping the ball and moving the ball through the thirds, which allows their outside backs to get a bit higher up into the attack. And they've got a solid six who can protect the back line, give them a little bit more defensive stability when they do have the ball in the attacking third. So it'll be interesting to see, a bit of a chess game between these two.
Yeah.
Jill, I wanted to ask you, with your close eye on some of these Tar Heel games, watching them take down Notre Dame in this previous match, I got to say it was really exciting. I think a lot of folks were maybe looking at this kind of game and that it had a feel as sort of a title-esque type of match between those two programs. What's something out of that game that the Tar Heels, did against the Fighting Irish that they could take into this final game that might maybe give them a little bit of an X factor?
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching the counter movement between the forwards and the midfield. Like the forwards would pop off that back line, draw the center backs of Notre Dame, and that left some space for Talia Della Pruto to really try to exploit. And that's how they found, I think it was their first goal that way. So I think all of their interchange up top and their shifty little movements and their ability to play the final pass, their vision, and their ability to beat players off the dribble, I think that makes them a formidable opponent in the attack.
So I love that we have people joining us in the chat right now live on YouTube. Thank you for doing that. Shout out to Barry, who lives in Cary, North Carolina. He said he's going to be at the match on Monday, the final. And he drops this little nugget. Of course, UNC is going to have a home crowd cheering them on because they are playing at home at WeekMed Soccer Park. Jill, how much of that is a factor in these types of games? Because fans travel to the championships and the College Cup. Like there's so many emotions going into this as a collegiate player, right? So some of these players are so young, 18, and they're coming into this. So how much of the emotions and being at home or being in this type of big energy game affects it?
I mean, to me, it's not really that important of a factor. I mean, you've got hundreds or thousands of people there cheering and yelling, and I'm sure Florida State will have their own entourage of fans there to support them. But this game already has so much pressure on it, right? You're in the College Cup, you're in the Final Four. This is a spot on the championship on the line. It's on ESPN. You got the bigwigs, Jen and Julie, calling the game. Thousands of people watching on TV. This game already has enough pressure on it. So surely the players are going to be having to manage that and not really, entertaining too much of what's happening in the crowd. But I think it will feel like a home match, I think, for both teams.
Yeah, I think you could maybe, if you're on the Florida State side of things, you can maybe even use that a little bit to your advantage in terms of like that motivating factor. I mean, they're the reigning champions, and perhaps you can maybe flip the script a little bit and say, like, because these games are taking place in North Carolina, yes, the Tar Heels are this like historic program, but maybe the pressure is on them as maybe, the team that they're perhaps going to have, yes, that underdog mentality and sort of saying like, hey, like we're going up against the national championships, but you're the team that perhaps has the pressure on you as the quote unquote home side, even though that's maybe not necessarily something that you anticipate once you get into these type of rounds. Is that something that maybe as reigning champions, the Seminoles are taking a look at or trying to use to motivate themselves, you think?
I don't think any of those players are motivated by anything other than going out there, giving their best effort and trying their best to win. And maybe it's a factor before the game, but as soon as that ball kicks, nobody's thinking about motivation of like needing that little extra to work harder. Like these are the best players in our country. This is their job. This is what they go out there and do week in and week out. And so I think it's just, for me, it would be managing the pressure of being on ESPN, managing the pressure of playing for a national championship, and what's their preparation look like before the match, and how are they dealing with those anxieties and those nerves. And then if you do, as a goalkeeper, if you do make a mistake, how do you recover well from that? So I think it's less about motivation and more about just dealing with high pressure situations.
Yeah. And I think emotions, because these are college kids that have, some of them waited their whole career for this moment, right? Their whole lives for this moment to play on the biggest stage that some of them will ever play on or have ever played on before getting to this point. And there are so many emotions going into it, and your families are there, and the crowd is cheering. And this is it. This is like the epitome of their career, because a lot of them don't go on to play post their collegiate careers. So this is it. These are the biggest games they will play in, the biggest goals they will score, the biggest goals they will defend, and they're laying everything out on the line. That's why I love watching these games. Like, it gets me so jazzed up to watch these young kids, because they are young and they are still kids at this point, and they're in college, and this is like the epitome of their fall, and then they still have a spring semester. So it's like everything crashing down at once. And the last semester of your collegiate career is the quickest and the most emotional, and everything is all over the place. It's like a roller coaster ride.
Mm-hmm. And you think about it too, as like, what if these players do go into the pro game, how many actually get to win a trophy? And in the NWSL, for the their international teams, like, it is far and few between that you actually get to challenge for a trophy of this magnitude this late in your career. So most people never get to challenge for a trophy in college or in the pro level. And so this is their opportunity. And if anything, I think there's probably more pressure on UNC going into this game, because there's such a legacy of championships and wins for this UNC program that I think that if anyone, I think there's more pressure on them.